meeting this morning. The first thing we'll do is we'll have our roll call, starting with you, Chris.
Christopher Spear.
Dean Colvin.
Brenda Myers.
Tom McFadden.
Diane Parsons.
Jay Stone.
Don Ecker.
Very good. Now, we have a little bit of a change in order today. Dr. Byron Halm, who's the Chief Health Officer for Marshall County, graciously agreed to come down and to share with this group kind of the history of why the sewer district came along and his thoughts on moving forward with the projects. Dr. Halm, are you ready to come forward? And Doctor, I'll move to the end so people can actually see you.
Thank you.
And maybe hear you better from this direction.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. I'm happy to be here. And I guess what I'm going to say is, I'm probably the one you can blame for everything that's going on because we started this 8 or 10 years ago in our department. And we did some testing and thought that there was a rising in fecal E. coli in our area due to probably failing or antiquated systems that did not meet what we need to meet. And I guess what I want to say is, from a little humor side, that we pay for convenience to have our indoor bathrooms. I had the privilege of not having an indoor bathroom for the first 7 years of my life. I liked until I was potty trained, it was great. My mom took care of everything, but after that, going out to the privy and using the Sears catalog for toilet paper was what I lived with for the first 7 years. So having indoor bathrooms, we consider that a privilege. Of course, I know you guys are concerned and we're running against costing. Costing is going up. I was fortunate enough with this gray hair to remember the 15-cent hamburgers. Those days are gone. So now moving on from the humor about this thing, let's talk about the problem and why our department recommended a regional sewer district. I'm really talking about protection and prevention. That's my part. That's it. It became apparent to some of us that some of the septic systems were failing, and we didn't always have a way to correct some of that. We didn't have enough land to correct that. We go to very expensive type alternatives to handle the so-called effluent that you guys understand about, I think by now, if you're saying. And so we took a study and based it on, and then we went to the commissioners and said, based on what we're starting to see from a preventive standpoint, how can we better handle the effluent discharge of our septic systems, and recommended that the regional sewer board be assimilated, and it was. And that's where you're standing today. So to go on more from my standpoint, it's for me to protect you and your environment and the lakes that it affects, as well as financially. The cost is there. If you do without the system, then you have very costly systems. But with the newer system or a closed system, we remove that, and we have done that within the lakes around us. You can see the Pretty Lake, the Kunzas Lake, the Lake of the Woods, things of that sort, who have put these in, looking at other areas. And it does corrupt the water because we're not feeding it with effluents that sometimes we if you can't see it, we don't worry about it, but we are starting to see it and we need to start worrying about it. Not maybe for current, but for future and generations down the way. As you know, I'm all about prevention, exercise prevention, things of that sort. So, sewage and partially treated sewage discharged from a home or business or from on-site sewer system is a public health hazard, and we are in charge of that. And so we're sort of like the police people when it comes to the sewer system. The local health departments have the authority and responsibility of enforcing the health laws and rules in Indiana, including the abatement of health hazards created by discharging sewers or effluents. So that's where we come in and why we made some of these recommendations. E. coli bacteria, which includes many individual species, is a member of the fecal coliform group of bacteria, and E. coli is an indicator organism which is relatively simple and low cost to test. Fecal coliform in surface or well water is indicative of contamination from a fecal source. We can type that. We can type, the duck E. coli. We can type all of it, and we can narrow it down to where do we have the human E. coli. When E. coli or fecal coliform is found in water, we must also be aware that the water contaminated by a fecal source also has a plethora of other disease-causing organisms, nutrients, chemicals that we need to look at. Many of the homes in these lake areas are served by antiquated sewer disposal technologies, old technique that was great when they were put in, but we made improvements in that and how we treat that. So it is well known that septic tanks connected to field or drainage tiles and just a means of transferring waste away from it is generated and deposited in areas where the tile discharges. These discharges typically lead to streams or ditches, and that's called our watershed area, and then gets assimilated into groundwater or enter a larger body of water. Also, inadequate sewer disposal systems, including dry wells, cesspools, and undersized and improperly designed septic systems can discharge sewers, including pathologic organisms, nutrients, chemicals, into surface or underground water sources. These types of failures are often the hidden sources of contamination, which are not easily traced from a source to the point of discharge. These types of systems are typically not documented or are poorly documented in the local health department files currently, and are in many cases overlooked as contributors to contamination until and unless a complaint arises and the source can be pinpointed, which is often hard to find. So that's some of the contamination, and where does it go? Water wells, and we have rules that you have to have your effluent, your tanks, 50 foot away from your well. There's a reason for that, because of the filtration. We get our well water comes from subterranean and also comes from down as it filters down through. So water wells are recharged with both surface and subsurface water from nearby areas. When surface waters and or groundwaters are contaminated, water wells in the areas can easily become contaminated. If homeowners are not routinely having their well water tested, contamination of drinking water may be present and never realized until testing is done or someone becomes ill. Regional water contaminated with a fecal source are very likely to cause disease in those who may recreate in water, including swimming, boating, wading, skiing, or other popular water-related activities. Full body contact is not necessary for disease to spread in these conditions. People are swimming, they happen to get a mouthful of water. If we have contaminated water around there, with E. coli, goes down, they cough, they aspirate, they pick up a E. coli pneumonia, and various things of that sort. Full-time residents in these areas may be contaminated, may develop some resistance to low-level contamination in the water they typically drink or recreate in. However, when family, friends, or tourists are exposed to these types of contaminations in drinking or recreational water, they may become very ill due to very low resistance. If you live in it, maybe you get some resistance. If you're from the outside, you may not have the resistance you need to prevent the infections. Pet and wildlife and livestock can also become ill due to contact with the contaminated water. Pets especially may track contaminated water or E. coli back to the homes, causing illness in those who may not be drinking the water or even recreating it and contaminated. The secondary sources of contamination are very difficult to trace back to the sources and may never be suspected of causing illnesses. While we are typically concerned about contamination from a public health aspect, this type of contamination and environmental degradation can also have a huge impact on the financial well-being of our communities and lakes. As failing systems or inadequate systems are identified and required to be replaced, many homeowners may find that it's very difficult and financially burdensome for the replacement, if not possible to replace with an appropriate size or design system. And there are many alternatives we can use. They're not as good as the old standard ones that does great filtration. Often in these situations, compromises the system sizing or design may make under the guidance of the best judgment, and the result is systems that do not perform optimally at all. If there is no option for system replacement, even with best judgment, these homes must then be put on a pump and haul system utilizing a sewer holding tank, or the home vacated until the solution is found. We find that especially with the small lot sizes, the lack of adequate drainage and the poor soils, it's really complicated, which I don't always understand. Soil scientists can help us tremendously in that, but it's a problem that we will gain over a period of time. So, with all of this being said, I did talk to Alice Quinn, who is the Indiana State Department of Health. She's in charge of residential on-site sewer system manager. And I asked her to give me a quote, and she says, "I hope it is clear that Indiana Department of Health does support the extension of sewers in these developed areas, which often offer a vast array of home sites and recreational sites in Marshall County. It is critical to ensure that our water resources, thereby human lives, are protected from the known potential source of contamination." She went on to say, "Please contact me if you have any further questions." Alice Quinn, and she is probably the most knowledgeable person on residential systems that we have at our state level. The only thing I can say is, from our standpoint, our department recommended that we do something about the rising problems that we see when we try to replace systems. And the only time we replace systems, of course, is if it really fails. But how many systems are currently failed? How many systems are currently antiquated? how many citizens are dumping stuff into our lakes. Now, we do know that we have a weed problem in several of our lakes. And for weeds to grow, we have to have fertilizer, and a lot of times that fertilizer is human fertilizer going into the lakes. I think I have talked to several people when this came up and asked them about Purdy Lake is becoming clear, Coates Lake is becoming clear. Everybody tells me that the lake quality seems to be getting better when they have a closed system around them. Is it costly? Yes. My concern from your health officer and to protect Marshall County truly is not to cause troubles, but really to look at our lakes, our homes, the financial standpoint of it in the future. And we have, I think there's two statements I can make, and I think it, contamination, if we don't do something about it, will continue to slowly rise. That's number one. And the cost of the fix will continue to rise. Now, I've talked to the gentleman here, and I know it's extremely costly for each and every one of you sitting out there from a standpoint of a monthly fee and how can I afford this and what help can give. And I'm going to ask the sewer district board, since I started all of this, that we look for a cost-effective way, and that will have to be by granting. And I don't think you actually can do much without having some grants available to help cover the underlying costs of the installation and the development of a system. But I can tell you that a closed system, from what I've learned and studied, is probably the best alternative in the long run over the period of time.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Doctor, just one last question before you leave. I know you have patience to see. Does the health department publish information about how many septics have failed throughout the year or not?
I don't think we publish that on a thing. I mean, we deal with it on a daily basis.
So it does occur?
Yeah. And it would be available. I mean, Faith could get that information to you.
Faith can provide it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor.
Any other questions from the board?
Oh, but thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, we'll go on to the next item on our agenda, the approval of meeting minutes. We have minutes for July 11th. Should we take these separately, Chris?
You can take them all together or separately, whichever.
Yep. We have meetings for the June 11th, 2025 board meeting. We have an executive session that followed that on June 11th. We have a special meeting that occurred on June 25th and an executive session which occurred on June 25th. Do I have a motion to?
I move to approve all of the minutes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Oh, well, now we're going to have to do it by name. Don, we'll start with you.
Don Ecker, yes.
Christopher Spear, yes.
Hello, it's Luke for the police.
Dean Colvin, yes.
Brenda Myers, yes.
Tom McFadden, yes.
Diane Parsons, yes.
Jay Stone, yes.
That concludes that.
Uh-huh.
He already did it.
Oh, he did first.
We have him first since he's on live. The next item on our agenda are the financials and claims approval. Do you have something for us, Brenda?
Our beginning balance was $2,234,960.26. We earned interest of $7,690.59. We dispersed $56,939 for an ending balance of $2,185,711.85. Claims for this month, we have 3 of them totaling $66,833.41.
Board members have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question about the monthly claims that we've had, and since I've been on the board the shortest period of time, sometimes it requires more explanation to me than perhaps to the others. But one of the things I want to bring up about the origin of the board, and I think Dr. Holland referred to it, is that they went through a process and then they asked the board, they asked the commissioners to go to the Indiana Department of Environmental Management and ask for a district sewer board as a setup. And one of the things that, in looking at these monthly costs that we have from JPR and from Carson's and from Baker and Tilly and those sort of things, they're high. I mean, it's extremely expensive what we're doing here, and that should be recognized right up front. But this sewer board started out with zero funds to operate, which essentially meant that it appears that the board had to rely on
Bond anticipation note.
bond anticipation notes for our operating expenses on into the future to pay for the administrative costs and the engineering costs to start a project up to look at whether it was going to be a closed system or some alternative systems at that point. And at some prior to my being on the board, there was a decision made to look more closely at the closed system. It would seem to be more economically feasible at the time. So the engineering project started in that respect. And from what I see of the engineering costs and the lawyers' costs and those sorts of things, they arise primarily out of the administrative costs of running the sewer board. And I hate to tell you this, but you guys are really expensive. But I don't know any other way that this board at this particular point in time can reduce those fees without incurring additional administrative costs, as Brenda and I discussed shortly, is where do you go out and find the people who have the expertise to do the type of work that we're asking JPR to do, or Baker or Tilly or Carson's to do, to manage this type of board. So for the benefit of those who come here and they say that there's a lot of expense to what you're doing so far, you're absolutely correct. There would be no one here that I could see that would argue that point with you. Was this the best way to do this? I can't say that I know whether it was or it wasn't, because I wasn't here at the time that the board made the administrative decision to go forward in this particular manner. But one of the things is I look at these, the expenses that we have here today, and that I wanted to express to all of you, because you are all my neighbors. I mean, there's at least 95% of the people sitting in this room that I know from one way or the other over the years that I've been in the community, to tell you that I recognize that these costs that are submitted to us each month, the voucher requests that are made each month, they are extremely expensive. And at some point, we need to either pump the brakes, and figure out where we're at in terms of how we're going to break the costs of this particular project down, either as a whole or break it down as a subpart in the future, in order to make the sewer district board most cost effective to you, the residents, first of all, and to the county as a whole. Because we're not only looking at this particular project, but soon there will be someone here, probably won't be me, but they'll be looking at the other 12 projects that have been identified, the other 12 areas that have been identified throughout the county. So this does affect a lot more people than have been showing up just for the Chain of Lakes district that we represent in PSA 1. So I just want to make that general statement that I've been looking closely at the figures. They raise my eyebrows as well. And at some point, we as a board are going to have to pump the brakes and say, okay, we need to figure out where we're going as far as the size and shape of this particular project here in the future. But one of the things I want to make is, in closing, is simply this, is based on what Dr. Holland has told us, and from the preliminary report that was done by, I think, Kenny from JPR, that brought this whole issue to the public forefront, where there were multiple hearings about forming the district board, is that there's the potential issues and the issues that we have to cover cover with regards to E. coli in the future and our waterways. And I think looking to dissolve the board or do away to board altogether, I wouldn't be favorable to that. Hopefully, many of you in this room would not be favorable to that too, because I think it represents something that will help and benefit Marshall County in the future. So I want to swing back around and tell you that in respect to some of these things, when you hear the cost as Brenda reported them, they are expensive. And the board's completely aware of that. I think, at least I am, and I've talked to Tom privately about it, that we need to come to some quick conclusions and decisions with regards to where we go with this sewer district right now in the future. With that said, I am quiet. Thank you.
Dean, that was an excellent summary. And I think all of us feel that way as well. So do I have a motion to approve the financials and the paying claims?
I'll make the motion to approve.
State your name.
Christopher Spear, make the motion to approve.
Jay Stone, second.
Christopher Spear, aye.
Dean Colvin, aye.
Brenda Myers, aye.
Tom McFadden, aye.
Diane Parsons, aye.
Jay Stone, aye.
Perfect.
Don Ecker, aye.
Thank you, Don. Okay, next on the agenda is the legal counsel update from Chris Nussbaum, our counsel.
Yeah, I only have one item to report on. We're made aware that the Marshall County Commissioners filed a declaratory action against Thomas McFadden. As everybody knows on the board, our bylaws provide to indemnify each and every one of you with regard to any actions that you take, whether they're threatened, pending, or completed in your service as a trust or officer. We have D&O policy insurance, and we're reviewing those terms against the current litigation that's pending. That's really all I have at this point. I think at the end, we believe we'll probably need to plan an executive session and a special meeting to address this issue.
Thank you, Chris. We don't have an insurance committee update. We don't have an engineering committee. Oh, do we have minutes for the engineering committee? We need to approve those?
Yes.
Okay.
Talk about that. Yeah, so we had an engineering committee meeting on June 23rd. And that was just to kind of go over. So we are still conducting site visits at JPR to go over serving people. We just kind of want to discuss certain things, particularly vacant lots or property owners that have kind of special situations. So more than just a house on the lake. So if they have, a barn across the street with a bathroom, or if they have a guest house and stuff like that. So we kind of just discussed different things about that. And that's something that, if a property owner has a special situation, they can always come to the engineering committee or talk to JPR, and we can present to the engineering committee. And we also discussed, like I said, vacant lots. So somebody planning to build in the future, and we just kind of went over what that would look like. And I think that as of now, the engineering committee's policy for the time being is that if you have different sewage producing structures on different parcels, then you will be getting, each would get their own grinder station is how that would be. So if you had a garage or an outbuilding or something and you wanted to combine parcels and then combine into your grinder station, then that's an option as well. But all of those special situations can be presented to the engineering committee to look at, and then, that's something that the board has discretion to kind of change, and develop a policy on. Really, we just haven't gotten to that point. I haven't talked to any property owners at this time that is in that situation, but we know we've done a lot of these projects, and we know that that's something that will come up at some point. So that was discussed. And then also the vacant lot and sewage producing and the non-sewage producing structure policies were discussed. I don't know if you want to talk about that any, but
Yeah, I think at this time they're still working on, the engineering committee is still reviewing those documents, both an agreement and a policy for full recommendation to the board. So we're not to that point yet, but they're putting that together to ultimately recommend to the board.
so that is what was discussed at the engineering committee. I have minutes attached with said draft policy as well, so I guess we can take a look at those, or we could decide if we're going to approve those minutes or not, or
Yeah, and it would just be approval of the minutes, not of the policies
Policy.
or anything. That's just still being discussed.
yes.
Okay, well, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Steen, say your name.
Dean Colvin.
Brenda Meyer, second.
Okay, now we will vote. We'll start with you, Don.
Don Ecker, yes.
Christopher Spear, yes.
Dean Colvin, yes.
Brenda Myers, yes.
Tom McFadden, yes.
Diane Parsons, yes.
Jay Stone, yes.
Okay. Now we move on to the engineering update. Kenny Jones.
Morning. I'm just gonna kind of hit a couple of the highlights of what kind of we've been up to here in recent weeks and what we will be up to between now and your meeting in August. With regard to, I guess I'll start with what I think Mr. Colvin was kind of touching on a little bit. Slowing down or pausing things as we take a minute to kind of look at these costs a lot closer and see what can be done about them, if anything. We've kind of internally already been doing that to a point. So next month you should see some noticeable reduction in our ongoing charges. That being said, we've not canceled any meetings with any residents because those were kind of commitments that were made, and people schedule those, and we didn't want to change the game on them. We also have a public information session coming up on Saturday that has been planned and scheduled and announced, and we didn't want to not do that in the event that there will be folks that'll be there that are looking for information or help, and we want to be able to do that for them. So that is still happening, but we also like tomorrow are spending getting all of our project leaders together and spending I think most, if not all, of the day together to look at a potential phasing recommendation. If assuming we can come up with something, our goal is to provide you a couple page memo and maybe some attachments and a discussion in that regard by your August meeting, so that we can start talking about that and see if there's any impact. If my mannerism or my choice of words seems a little hesitant, it's only because when you break it into phases, you are talking about less, a smaller group of ratepayers for a smaller section of the project, and then building another phase or two phases in years later. And as Dr. Holm alluded to earlier, as time goes on, costs tend to only go in one direction. So it's not the easiest of decisions or the easiest of things, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't look at it. And so that's what we're doing. So we'll have hopefully something interesting to discuss with you in that regard by your August meeting. We also, just as a reminder, we've got a BZA meeting and a Plan Commission meeting this month here in Marshall County relative to the small little postage stamp site for Pump Station 1 that we have under contract for purchase. We're doing that in order to comply with the local zoning requirements and subdivision control requirements in the interest of just kind of being a part of the county's system and how it works. So, and I guess I would also since I have the floor, I'd also, and I may sound like I'm like a broken record, but any time and effort any and all of us can spend trying to decide what we think is affordable or not affordable is time well spent. You know, we've spent a lot of time in the last several weeks internally looking at, I mean, we've worked on a ton of these projects over the years. Pretty much have a couple of them going almost at all times since the late 90s at JPR. And, you know, when you look at the monthly rates that we've seen other projects move forward with, there's never been a time where a monthly rate was popular, ever. It just isn't popular. And I have a household too, so I get that too. But when you look at projects that from 10 years ago, let's say, I know of a couple over in Steuben County that were built 10 years ago with monthly rates of around $125 a month 10 years ago, and you adjust that for inflation, you're at 170 and change because of what we've seen in our economy that none of us have any control over. So I'm not saying that means $170 is an affordable rate. I'm just simply saying this issue faces every one of these projects, and it's never an easy issue with an easy answer. Again, I think we'll have something for your hopefully meaningful consideration by August, and then maybe we take a month to review that, and then maybe we make some decisions about around September or so as far as actually phasing this project. The good news is the vast majority of the fees that we've charged to date have resulted in information that's beneficial to the project under any circumstance or any scenario. So none of the time that we've spent has been wasted in that regard. So there's nothing that we'll have to like do a second time or anything like that. So it's just a matter of how you set the project up to go to bid, frankly, and how you time it. So I think that's about the meat of our update this month. Unless
Kenny,
you
I
have
put you
questions.
on the spot if I ask you about where we're at percentage-wise with completing plans and specifications and where we are in terms of when we might bid.
I'll use kind of language that's more specific to our office, and I'll say that we are pretty much done with what we call preliminary design, meaning we have the entire area mapped horizontally and vertically. We have first mains laid out, grinder stations placed, quantities determined. Allie and her helpers are monitoring the hydraulic functionality of that layout, and they're monitoring it every time we tweak it. So we're almost half done with being ready to go to bid. Starting at 0 and putting a project on the street being 100, we're at 50 almost. That's how I would quantify
So
it.
does the completion to bid, does that period of time accelerate pretty fast then? Because you've done I guess
Generally, yes.
You've done the mountain work, so to speak.
Yes.
I mean, when you do a project like this, you map it horizontally, vertically, you're doing
We're
all your
almost.
topography work and everything like that.
Yes.
So you've done the lion's share of it, and my question is, from a cost point,
Sure.
then does that speed up towards conclusion to go to bid then?
Yes.
You have less time in it.
Yep.
Okay. The other question I have, but it's on the agenda here. How many of these folks in this room, not individually, but how many folks in the project have contacted you to discuss perhaps sites of grinders and that sort of thing?
I think we've been contacted by somewhere between 75 and 100, and we've met with about 50. And that number goes up all the time.
Okay.
And the number will probably be higher after this weekend as well.
Anything else, Kenny?
Not right now.
Okay. Next on our agenda, we have our financial advisor, Jeff Rao, here from Baker Tilly. And I think he has an update to provide.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, Jeff Rowan, Big Silly.
Jeff, you're gonna need to go talk in the speaker.
Oh,
sorry.
All right.
I think it's on.
All right, how's that? Okay. So we've been assisting the district with the trying to secure funding for the Phase 1 project. As you know, the district also, as you know, it has applied, gone through the steps of applying for funding through the State Revolving Fund Loan Program, the SRF program, which is really the primary source of funding currently for these types of projects, which means it's a very popular program, which means it's very competitive. And there are certain hoops that you have to work through, or certain thresholds throughout the process to get you to the point where we are now. And it was mentioned earlier about the issuance of a bond anticipation note. So the projects that we talk about here in terms of SRF's funding cycle are all at different places, points in time in terms of where they're at in their project. As you're aware, and we just heard, the district is roughly halfway through the preliminary design. We've gone through quite a bit of the preliminary rate analysis and obviously the legal steps, all of that which costs money, right? And so with 100% of the, or close to 100% of the projects that I know we've worked on over the years require upfront seed money because there's no revenue source, right? Right now, we're not billing. There's no revenue source to be able to pay for professional fees to advance the project to the point where you can actually bid and be funded, get funding. So I just kind of want to speak to that a little bit. Maybe to share a little bit more about the SREP program and the timing involved. So the SREP program works on a state fiscal year, which runs from July 1st, which we just started, halfway through the summer now, I can't believe it, through June 30th of next year, so July to end of June. When you, so at that point, that's when the SRF has come out with its draft, what they call a project priority list. And so at that point, if a community is within the fundable range, then the clock starts ticking, if you will, in terms of having to have a project designed, bid, rates and charges adopted, and closed on the loan. And what SRF historically has required is that from July 1, if you're in that fundable range, you'd have to go through all those steps and close by March 31st of the following year. So in this case, it would be by March 31st. We'd have to commit to closing on the loan and have all those steps done by March 31st of 2026. So when you're dealing, most of these projects, obviously, as you know, require a pretty long runway to get through design, the legal steps, the financial steps to get to that point. So 9 months is a pretty small timeline, right? And so, as I mentioned earlier, the majority, if not all, the projects are either, that seed money is either funded through, an upfront grant contribution, either by a county or a municipality of some sort, or a short-term note or a bond anticipation note. And so, as you're all aware, the district has issued a bond anticipation note in order to advance the project to the point where when we do get funded, we will be able to commit to that timeline to be able to close and secure that funding. So just kind of want to share a little bit of background there in terms of why it's important to either receive grant or short-term bond anticipation note up front. So back to the SRF process, the project priority list. As I mentioned, they've released their draft version of that, and once they did, then that starts a 30-day comment period, which actually ends today, July 9th. And so in total, there was $1.2 billion requested by combination of sewer districts, conservancy districts, municipalities, requesting loan dollars and to the extent available grant dollars for their projects. So very competitive. We continue to see that need within the state in terms of septic elimination projects and municipal wastewater projects. So, and this is just for clean water. So this is small system clean water. There are obviously other drinking water projects, other large municipal projects that are seeking funding. This is just what they consider small clean water projects. So 1.2 billion. There were a total of 85 projects that were actually scored and ranked on their list, which means they completed and submitted a preliminary engineering report. They submitted an application, so they completed an upfront asset management plan. So they kind of went through all the steps needed, checked all those boxes to be able to be scored and ranked. So a total of 85 projects. That totals totaling all those estimated project costs together, that's about $931 million that's been requested. Only the top 9 projects are selected or have been selected for potential funding, totaling $188 million. So as you can see, there's a pretty wide gap there between the actual need and the actual funding available through the SRF's traditional program, which is the low interest subsidized program that we've been seeking. So only 9 out of the 85 projects on the draft PPL have been identified for funding. So the district actually was ranked 42nd, so about halfway, about the midpoint in terms of the total projects. And at that halfway point, those total projects are about $591 million. So half a billion dollars. It would take about $500 million in order to fund up through the district's project if those dollars were available. So we didn't receive, funding, traditional funding this round. The SRF kind of resets everything every year, every fiscal year. And so if you don't receive funding, then you stay on the project priority list. Always looking at ways to help improve the score to kind of work our way up on that list. Still a little ways to go to get the traditional funding. There is always, not always, but potential for funding through SRF through a separate program that they offer. It's called the pooled program. It is a little higher interest rate, but it's still lower, would result in a lower interest rate than what we could get if we were to go out and say issue a bond on the open market on our own, because we would have the state's credit rating backing on that. So there is still potential for funding. This round, we did not qualify, as I said, in terms of traditional funding, but will continue to be on that list for the next state fiscal year. And then, as JPR mentioned, and I know the project working group will be looking at ways to identify perhaps a project that maybe can score better or is maybe more cost effective. Obviously, weighing that against the number of customers and resulting monthly bill, right, which could be impacted, but continue to look at ways to, bring forth a project that's affordable and effective and maximizing the number of septic relief lots that we can affect. So that's what I have for you today as an update. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Are there things that we can do as a board and for this project to raise the score? What can we do to improve our score?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we've continued to look at ways. We actually requested SRF has their own scorecard, what they call a scorecard, and we've all reviewed that. It looks at a lot of different things. What are the merits of the project? Some of the points are weighted based on what what are the benefits, obviously. So septic relief is one. So we kind of already checked that box. Regionalization is another one where we can receive some extra bonus points. And this project includes regionalization potentially with City of Plymouth or other surrounding municipalities for future projects. So really those are, some of the primary ways we can look at increasing our score. Also additional local funding. So we know that the county initially offered, or actually gave $50,000. I know maybe wasn't as much as maybe what the district was hoping for initially, but $50,000 was contributed to kind of help get some things started. That also gives us additional points. And I don't believe that was actually taken into account in their scorecard. We did point that out. So there are things we're looking to do, but at the end of the day, there's only so much we can do because they kind of have their list and you got to kind of work within their parameters. But we continue to do that. And really, I think what would be, most effective is kind of what we've all kind of talked about today is looking at the potential of phasing, finding a project that, hopefully is maybe a lower cost project, but still, we're able to target a monthly rate that is workable. And so that's what.
Yeah, Jeff, I've heard it said that sometimes SRF is more favorable to smaller scale projects because when they give a grant, it has a greater impact on lowering the consumer's monthly rate. Is that true in your experience?
Yeah, I don't know that I've seen it. So their criteria, they won't give like additional points for that, but certainly they'll take that into account because funding is limited, right? So, we're bringing forth a 26
million,
$20+ million project. They only have $188 million to fund, right? So if we were able to find a project, that's a big ask. That's not unusual, but that's a big ask. So if we were able to identify a project that perhaps was much less in terms of dollars, that might improve our chances of actually moving up because we're not asking for as much as what the full phase one project asked for. So it may not mathematically help us in terms of their score sheet, but I think it could help us in terms of just pure availability or capacity of funding from their program.
And could you explain, for example, let's say on a $20 million project, you end up with a $4 million grant. You want a $4 million grant, but let's say you scale it back to a $10 million project and you ask for a $4 million grant. Doesn't that have a pretty significant impact on monthly rate?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Of course, it depends on the number of users.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're scaling it back, it depends on how much we're cutting, how many users we're cutting out of the project. Because it's really it's a math game.
Mm-hmm.
You want to maximize the number of users, minimize the level of cost. But certainly having $4 million on a $10 million project versus $4 million on a $20 million project is going to make a bigger difference in terms of the rate for sure. Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions for Jeff?
I just got a couple. So this doesn't appear to me from last year's result when we applied in the pool. I mean, we were 22nd last year in the pool, I think, if I remember correctly. This year we moved to, it looks like you said 42nd. So we kind of moved down in the direction of the pool. Now that I understand there's probably a lot of things that influence that. I mean, maybe other projects came in that had higher priority than even projects that were in the pool last year. It seems to me there must be something within our package that we present that has a significant contribution to our moving down. Does that also apply to the social economic surroundings of the district that you have? I mean, in terms of the ability of people to finance this project in terms of rates and that sort of thing, or not? Maybe I'm fishing for something here that's probably not.
Yeah. I was a little surprised that we did move down because we really checked a lot of those boxes that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
But it's really every fiscal year is sort of a standalone. It's unique because, as you pointed out, there's new projects that are applied for. There may be communities that, for example, are maybe between last year and this year, maybe are facing an agreed order, for example. Maybe their system has dilapidated to the point where, they really need it because otherwise their sewer system is going to fail, for example. Other projects, maybe there's state projects involved in a combination with a particular municipal project. For maybe, for example, I'm thinking of City of Angola, for example. Just thinking of another project we're working on, but they're working with DNR to take over and operate the Pokagon State Park system for their water and sewer. So I just use that as an example. Is every year there's different projects that come up and different needs that arise that causes the fluctuations within that project priority list. I wish I could say I knew exactly why we moved to 20 spots. I can't. I really can't, because there's so many different moving pieces and parts to the puzzle. Really, all we can go off of is the scorecard that they provide us, and really analyze that, kind of what we've done, and look to see if there's any opportunity for some additional points that we may be leaving on the table. I mentioned one that we looked at, and that was the contribution from the county, the upfront contribution, which will add, I think it was 3 points. So it's not going to move the dial much, but those are some additional points that we could secure.
50,000 is not going to move the dial much on a $24 million project. As far as enthusiasm about local units of government supporting the project.
Yes.
I mean, the more buy-in they have, the better it looks for us when we apply for the grant.
Yeah. So on the scorecard, there's 3. Not to get too far in the weeds, but there's 3 categories of questions. Have you requested local funding? Have you been and I may be messing up the wording here, so I don't have it committed in memory, but has funding been committed, or have you received funding? So it doesn't really give specific dollar amounts, but within each one of those categories, there's a sliding scale or increasing scale of points. So like the first question, if you've requested, maybe you get 1 point. If they've committed funding, maybe you get 3, and then if you've received funding, which we have, granted, it's only 50,000, but if you've received any kind of local funding, then you get, I think it's 6 points. So the point system isn't specific or tied to the dollar amount. It's just whether you've actually requested or received.
So they don't pull the screen back and look to see. Well, that's unusual.
Right.
Looking at I'm just looking at the draft PPL. If those 6 points were added, this project would move from number 46 to, and if no one else changed, would move from 46 to about number 30. There's a total possible points of 200. The number 1 project out of all of them scored 112. Just to try to quantify it a little bit. So it would help a little bit. Yeah.
What was not just out of curiosity, I mean, if you're looking at something like that, what was the largest project that they funded dollar-wise? Do you know?
I don't know, Kenny, if you have that list in front of you. I apologize. I didn't have the actual list with me.
I'm looking at it. 17.8 million. But the second largest is 67. And the third is 78. Fourth is 113. Fifth is 142 million. Or no, that's cumulative. Hello. 17 million is number 1, 50 million number 2, 10 million number 3, 35 million number 4, 28 million number 5.
So we're in the range.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the range.
We're in the range. That was my point. I mean, they funded projects the size of ours. It's not that ours is so gigantic that they just shy away from that number, that they funded it. It was just, we haven't scaled right for some reason. But that's a pretty big jump. I mean, you know, from answer the block, you get 6 extra points, we jump up to 38 from 55, and I think you said they funded down to what?
Number nine, yeah. So $188 million is what they were looking to fund within their traditional
Right,
program.
188. Okay. My last question, and I apologize. The pool program funding. Tell me a little bit about that, how that works. Is that competitive, or is that just something you go and ask for, and how's that work?
Yeah. So that it's kind of unique to the state of Indiana, and every state has an SREP program. We have a very strong, one of the strongest SREP programs in the country.
Right.
But the state some years ago recognized the need. You know, we've talked about $1.2 billion that's been applied for just this year in projects. They identified a huge amount of need out there, and recognizing that they only, you know, so the state is funded from EPA. So EPA allocates a certain amount of dollars every year and just distributes that to states. So the state of Indiana receives an allocation of dollars every year. That's never enough to do what you need to do within the state. So the state recognized that they needed to create a program that would allow projects to still get funded and move forward, albeit maybe not at the lowest subsidized interest rate that the traditional EPA program allows for or provides for. But they developed what they call a pool program. And what that is it allows for projects that are ready to move forward, that need to be done, to secure funding, but didn't fall within the traditional program funding range. So those that didn't fall within the top 9, if they still have a very important need and they're ready to move forward, they can request funding from SRF. What SRF does then, historically, twice a year. So they do the state issues a bond in the fall and issues another bond in the spring, typically, and they would pool projects together, kind of making up a number here, but they may pool a half a dozen projects together, call it $100 million, and the state would go out and issue a bond, receiving the state's credit rating, AAA credit rating, and a project could get funded through that. It is at a higher interest rate. However, you're still at the highest bond rating rate that you could get, which is AAA. So it's still very, very competitive, but not as low as what you could get through the traditional program. So the process to secure funding through pool program is pretty much the same as the traditional. It's just the end result, the pool of dollars that you're getting are at a higher interest rate.
Well, Jeff, I don't think there are any other questions. Thank you for coming.
Yep, my pleasure. Thank you.
Now we move on to the pre-design activities. Are you going to handle that, Chris? Or is that you, Kenny?
Kind of went over it already.
Yeah, I can handle I got a comment on City of Plymouth. We were supposed to meet with them on Monday, June 30th, but in reviewing the information that we had prepared to review with them at the last minute, myself and Kim Sr. found a couple of numerical issues that we wanted to correct before we met with them, so we had to reschedule it, and that rescheduling is currently in process. But I'm nearly certain that meeting is going to take place before your August meeting. We just haven't put it on the calendar yet. There's people emailing back and forth right now to figure out when it works. So I apologize for that. if you, depending on when you ask me, I'm irritated that we decided to review it at the last minute, but I'm also thankful because I would rather not meet with them at all than meet with them with numbers that had any kind of questions or issues involved. So, so I don't have anything to report that's real meaty on that right now, other than to say that we had to reschedule that meeting. So.
And I guess for a general update, we're still conducting site visits and we're gearing up for the project information meeting. And after that, I assume that we'll be out here doing a lot of site visits, probably on a weekly basis. And that's kind of what we have going on our end at JPR, so.
Okay, now we turn to the district website.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Oops.
Who's going to talk about the district website?
Oh,
I believe you guys were sent a link that you could go and review and take a look at it. So if anybody had any questions or comments, otherwise we will go ahead and start using that instead of going through the counties.
I looked at it and I thought it looked good.
Or using ours, so I don't know if we wanna do a motion to go ahead.
Formal motion.
Yeah, if you just want to have a motion to adopt and utilize the website as tested and provided.
Okay.
And make that live.
Diane Parsons, I move that we use the website that was submitted to us for future use.
I'll second that. Christopher Spear, second.
Okay, start with the voting. Don?
Don Ecker, yes.
Christopher Spear, yes.
Dean Colvin, yes.
Brenda Myers, yes.
Tom McFadden, yes.
Diane Parsons, yes.
Jay Stone, yes.
Okay. Just let us know when it's up and running.
I do.
And then there is a proposed project information meeting. You want to talk about that, Chris, a little bit?
I'll let Allie go
Me
ahead.
and Kenny can talk about it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so there's a project information meeting that will be held this Saturday. I believe it is from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. At the Plymouth Wesleyan Church at 11203 Michigan Road in Plymouth. We're just developing a bit of a presentation, kind of, like I said, it's just going to be a proposed project information meeting. So we're just going to go over, this is our proposed project, and I think answer a few general project related questions, and also have the ability to sign up for site visits while you were there. But it'll just kind of go over some general information, just due to the fact that there has been so many questions about the project. And also, I believe that we agreed or announced that we would be having a meeting as such when we sent out our easement packets. So kind of fulfilling that responsibility through that. So we welcome all to come if you'd like to sit and learn about the project. So that's all I really have.
And Allie, will we have the opportunity to turn in our easement packages at that time?
Yep, and I'll be available as well with my notary stamp to notarize, and or if people have questions or if there's things that they think aren't correct on it, I can take those notes and we can get them revised.
Okay, thank you.
And how many of us are allowed to attend?
So we don't want to have a quorum. We don't necessarily need this to be a public meeting. That then requires the public testimony, and we want to utilize the time on the weekend efficiently. So no more than 3. Whoever that might be.
who's coming?
Now, can it be different people at different times, just not 3 at one time, or?
It should just be 3.
I won't be there, I have company.
Yeah.
From out of state.
Yeah, I'll be out of town, so.
I will be available.
1.
Yeah.
I was gonna go.
Got it.
You're the 3 then that'll be there?
Sounds good.
Now we come to the part of our meeting where we offer the people from the audience to come up for public comment. We just ask that you please state your name and address and limit your remarks to 3 minutes. I have the list here. Does James Lafford care to come forward?
I simply have a quick question, and I'm sure everybody can hear me because I'm kind of loud. But anyway, at the end of June, the Plymouth Sewer District dumped water, pure sewage, raw sewage into the river for 72 hours. It's right here. This was put out by Donnie Davison, who is the Superintendent of Public Utilities. I want to know how we justify putting sewers in to protect all these lakes, and periodically they dump it in the river. What about the river? This is called a combined sewer event, or sewer overflow. There's laws and it's legal, but Plymouth is supposed to have a long-term plan. We say, or I've heard it said here at this meeting, that they have the capacity to handle these extra sewers, like Pretty Lake, the one they're gonna put in out here, all of those. But periodically they dump in the river.
You're saying that city of Plymouth did that?
Right here. The superintendent of the, let me get it right, Plymouth Utility Superintendent put this notice out the end of June. They had 2.4 inches of rain. They dumped sewage for 72 hours. Raw sewage in the river. This board, I'm sure, has some jurisdiction over that. Now, it's not illegal. However, it's immoral. So why are we trying to protect the lake and destroy the river? Which is exactly what's happening. I just want you to think about that for a while.
Thank you for bringing it to our attention. Jack Davis.
Morning, I'm a resident of Lawrence Lake, and I just here to speak in support of the sewer district and bringing in the sewer system. I have at least 2 fairly close neighbors right now that are using pumping to take care of their sewage, and I know that that's an expense to them because they cannot put in a new system. I have a relative who last year, family of 7, their septic system went down. It was one that was put in originally many years ago. No records in our health department of how the system was developed or built. Anyway, they had to put a new system in. There was not room on the property that they have. They luckily owned the lot across the street, so they were able to put it across the street. Cost a lot of money for them to do that. What I'm getting at is I think that at Lawrence Lake, and I think at many other lakes, we have a lot of homes that are in that situation, that at some point in time, their system is not going to be able to handle what they need, and their property is going to become uninhabitable, or it's going to cost significantly more than what we're talking about to put in a new system. So I think it's time for all of us to understand that, what benefits me. I have a system that's working. I'm getting up there. Hopefully it'll go until I'm not there. But there's a lot of people a lot of my neighbors that we have to be concerned with too. So we have to be concerned with not only ourselves, but our neighbor, our community. And so I know it's tough and I know it's hard, but I think it's more than just how it affects me. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Woodward.
Good morning. Do I need to state my name and address and all that stuff? Are we doing
Why
that?
not?
Why not? Bill Woodward, 12094 Peach Road, Plymouth. So on the funding, I just got a couple questions. Baker Tilly, the guy from Baker Tilly said that we didn't make that list. Was that funding or was that grant money or what was that?
Money.
What was the application for? Was it for grant money or was it for a funding?
Essentially, it's for funding. It's through a grant. I mean, the state of Indiana has this grant process, and they call it SFR, right, Kenny?
SRF.
SRF. It's state revolving funding. It's a reserve pool of money that they set out for different projects like this. This is my understanding of it, and Kenny, you can correct me if I'm wrong. And it's a very competitive source of funding. A lot of municipalities are involved in it. A lot of sewer districts like ours are involved in it just as well. And so it's based on a competitive need for a particular project. And that was my concern as to where, I'm glad we heard it today because I hadn't heard the final number until today. I was surprised that we slipped down on the list as far as we did. Well, not final, it's draft. But it's not like we were going to move up
20 places.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, just not here, but, people spend years on this list.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
So this isn't anything abnormal, out of the circumstances.
It's just like, it's our hope, which is not a plan, but our hope that you make it up on the top of the list. And
well, I was curious,
obviously we didn't.
I was curious because
Yeah.
in the initial proposal from JPR, it was about 22 million or something like that for the project. So I didn't know if this was a request or an application for funding or if it was grant because the monthly rates are based on grant money along with funding. So I was just trying to get my head around what was that? Was that a combination of both? Was that funding? Was that grant money?
It's both.
It's both?
Do you have that still up?
Yeah.
So the first 9 projects, even though there's $188 million, those are grant funds that are being issued. The total value of all of that particular project is probably well into at that point, 300 million total.
Yeah.
It's grants, it's loans, 0% interest loans. It's a combination of
Is there any
several
way
things.
we can look at that and see that information? Is there a site we can go to?
We don't
Is it?
know
Okay.
exactly what they're doing to what communities. They don't tell us that.
I just didn't know if there was some way we could look at results and see what was going on that list.
Yeah. It's on India.
It's on the SRF.
Indiana.
Yeah.
SRF, clean water, small project.
But as far as what they're giving grants and loans to those communities, we don't know what they're giving at grants or loans to those communities. We don't know that.
I was just curious if we were, at the original proposal, like if it was 75% grant money of that 22 million, then it kept the monthly service fee down to about $100. So I was curious whether that was a combination, how that all affected everything is all I was curious. Whether it was 75% grant money still looking for, whether it's 50%, or do you put in, you want 22 million? How does that work?
I think it's safe to say that, the impact of not getting that particular grant, that's going to affect the calculation of all of the numbers. And when you say try to get your head around it, I'm still trying to get my head around it as to how we come to a reasonable figure that each of the monthly, for the monthly service fee. But I don't give up hope. You always go out and you look to see what else might be available to help fund the project as well. And again, I go back to my original statements. We got to rely on Carson and JPR and those folks that have done these sewer projects across the state of Indiana for years, but perhaps to help us look for additional funding. That's the goal. I don't want to pay any more than you want to pay, right?
Right.
And I want clean water. I don't think there's anybody in here. Does anybody want to stand up and say they don't want clean water around their lakes? I don't think anybody's going to say that. And we want to keep it that way.
Yeah.
But it's at a cost. I don't care if it's a cost of you putting in some new system or putting in a loop system like Dr. Holland's recommended to their group. It's still a cost. And the whole project, the whole idea for us is to get it as low as we possibly can. I don't think there's anybody that sits on this board, in my opinion, I've talked to every one of them, that isn't concerned about cost and keeping it down and that being an objective as well. And putting in a meaningful system that'll, actually we're investing for the years in this project. And you know that as well. I'm not telling you anything. I'm singing to the choir when I tell you that.
He still asked whether it was a loan or a grant.
Well, I think she explained it. It's a combination of loans and
You
grants.
always try to get as much grant, obviously, as you
Yeah.
can. I mean, you always ask for grant, that's obviously what we want because,
I guess that was my question. Did we ask for like 75% of the whole thing is grant?
oh, we always
Did they
ask
put
for
the
all
limit on it?
grant. I mean, obviously we go in asking, give us all grant,
Yeah, I didn't know
you
there
know.
was a limit that you could ask for as far as the overall project.
Oh, we always push for the limit.
Well, I mean, as far as just a limit of how much money you can ask for?
No, I meant like that. So let's just say the project is a $22 million project.
Okay.
Can you ask for 22 million grant, or can you only ask for a percentage of that project?
No, another way to say it is we're asking for 22 million in the best way they can give it to us,
And
whatever
maybe
that
how
means.
that is.
Yes.
And then so each one of those cases is obviously individual.
Yes.
But you ask for the overall, and then they tell you what they can do for grants
There-
and funding.
Yes, and there's been years in the past where SRF had, a noticeable amount of grant funds available for political reasons that I'll never understand, and then there's years that they don't have any grant, it's just loan. For similar, difficult to explain political reasons.
That was just curious if you could only ask for so much of the project
Difficult to
cost, or if you just
understand.
asked for the whole thing and they divided it up and said, if you got approved,
Generally speaking.
this is what you're gonna get for grant, this is what you're gonna
That's-
get for loan.
You were accurate.
So when you look at that list, you're gonna see in that list, and you'll see like this district showed like a $200 some thing that you're bringing up. What that shows is that this board doesn't want that, right? So what the SRF is looking at, we need your grant money so that these properties owners, because this board doesn't want property owners to pay a $200 bill. We need your grant money so that property owners don't have to pay that, right? So that it can bring down a bill, right? And you're gonna see on that list, some of those districts are saying their bill would be $300 and some a month. And that's what,
I think the highest one I saw was 509.
right. So you see, this is what people are going to SRF and saying, we need grant money, we need help for these property owners to be able to have an affordable monthly bill. And this is what you're gonna see when you review that list.
And that explains it. That explains, I was just curious how
Right.
that works.
Yeah.
Because I know in your original proposal, you went in with
Yeah.
no grant money and then 75%. So I didn't know if that was maxed out at 75%, you asked for it all. and they
That's
gave
just
you
what
that,
we
you
knew. That's just what we knew at that time was, we'd seen possible in other
Feasible.
projects. Right.
And then they can give a 0% interest loan or low interest loan, so they kind of divided up what they have available, that type of thing.
And
Thank you, Bill.
that initial data is
I'm
6
already
years
you're
old
over
now,
3
just
minutes.
so you
Yeah,
know.
but there's been a lot of discussion.
Okay.
All I wanna know is,
One last question.
is the board still a voluntary board, or are you getting paid yet?
We don't get paid a nickel.
I just was curious, that's all I wanted to know, cause I
Never
I
have.
knew you weren't for a
We
while.
we had an opportunity to vote ourselves a per diem when we started, which is allowed by statute, but we all turned it down.
Well, and I heard comment at one of the meetings that somebody said, well, I'll get paid for this, because I know we're giving you grief, and I knew that what comment was made, so I was just curious whether you had voted on it yet or not.
No,
That's all.
no.
All right.
We don't plan on taking any money.
All right, thank you.
That wouldn't help the project.
Pardon people, actually.
Okay, Tricia, do you want to come up and speak? Okay. Mark Holt.
Basic thing. Mark Polk, Woodford 521 Olive Lane, and I just want to read a statement. Dear board members, I'm here today to express my utmost disgust at how this board is conducting itself. The board was selected to represent the homeowners of the areas possibly affected by the creation of the sewer district and to carry out business which is in the best interest of the people in the said district. To this date, this quest has turned into a power struggle, which is not good business for anyone, and it's costly. The board did not practice due diligence in fact-checking the information provided by JPR, nor has the board responded to requests on information they've used for decision-making. My personal experience with a board member was, the information is out there, you just have to read it. This statement lacks empathy or compassion for the people who are troubled with all the rhetoric and false information being provided. There have been requests for proofs that the lakes are contaminated. Where is this source of contamination if it exists? So much new information has come to surface recently, and there are many personal confrontations going on. I would strongly suggest the board take a lengthy pause in what they're doing to find new focus on the whole ordeal. Alternatives must be considered, even if after the fact. The good of the people should be paramount in this whole endeavor. As board members are obligated to carry out the mission that represents the good of the people, not your own agendas. Stand up and do the right thing. Advocate for the people you represent, not your hurt feelings. Thank you for your time.
Okay, Tim Overmeyer? Did I say that right? Chad Montgomery? Jim Leary? Oh, okay.
Jen.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's Jen Leary.
So, the largest question in my mind, I'm Jennifer Leary, 15986 Cook Lake Trail. And I don't know if any of you can answer this. I had my hands on it once, and I did not copy it at the time. So, because I hear so many other reports about the reports of a water sample, I want to ask you, do any of you know when E. coli is found, it's my understanding that there is another step. We type the E. coli. You can't just blame it on geese, or you can't just blame it on groundhogs or whatever might be hanging around the lake. That there's a typing that can be done, like a genome, yes, that you can tell if this is human. Therefore, that you've got the issue with septics. And secondly, you see nitrogen and phosphorus a lot in problems with lakes and our lakes. And at least one of those can be also from human fecal content. Does anybody have answers on that? Or any further information, or where to go?
Dr. Holmes still here. Do you want to speak on that issue?
You addressed.
Well, the actual testing though. So if Joe Schmo says, well, that's just the animal that lives down by the lake. Well, okay. Is it, or is there a little more? As I understand it, you type that. And at some point, you're required to type that if you've got a problem.
The only recollection that I have of hearing one that was typed, I think, was a USDA report.
I see.
And that was, I think, basically rivers.
Was that part of the watershed study?
I wonder too.
Is that part of the watershed study, Jay?
And he's
I don't
sitting.
know. I would assume it would be, yeah.
Stinson was part of that as well, right? Former health officer, Christine, or former health board person. As I remember her saying, now we do our due diligence, we have E. coli, now is it human, is it livestock, is it, and then she went on as to how that is conducted. I cannot find it at the moment, and I wondered if anybody, nothing? Okay. Yeah, if any of you hears of a link or something, I'd be interested to know about that.
We'll certainly look into it, and we will post it, but I think there was such a fine, Dr. Holm, I think, alluded to it when he was speaking.
I believe too that another health board person had told me, and I don't know her title, but that yes, and that there's only certain labs that go that far, and it will cost you more for that sample. And if you want to do your own sample, you will be paying for it and maybe even driving it to another town. My understanding was there was one in South Bend called Element. I have not been able to get anywhere with that. Here's why I ask, is because you see, well, that's just a wildlife, and so I did the good thing, I went out and I had this done, but, you know, it proves, but does it? So that's my question. As far as Baker Tilly goes, I just want to point out, I don't know him, not sticking up for him, but it seems to me I've been, you know, on a board before for a charity, and some of us paid to, I did not, but there's fees for places that will teach you how to get a grant. So it's my understanding from what I hear and from what I read that Baker Tilly is part of the expertise then. It's why we don't have Jill and Joe Schmo going to learn how to get a grant. Is that the case?
Yes.
And I see the name in Baker Tilly a lot, and JPR to some extent, in the other business of the council, business of the commissioners. So this is not the only agency that uses those folks, right?
Correct.
Okay. So I ask that because we have a particular commissioner who's really slamming what's spent, and maybe there's room, as Mr. Colvin said, to pause. I don't dispute any of that. But if the whole county or the whole city commonly uses a certain agency or agencies for a certain purpose or purposes, and they're doing the same thing, then maybe there's something more behind why suddenly we're concerned about the expenses. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Does everybody else wish to come up during the public comment period? If not, is there any other business anybody would like to bring before the board today? If not, do I have a motion to close the meeting? Don? Second. And say your names.
Christopher Spear. Yep.
Pete Colvin, yes.
Brenda Myers, yes.
Tom McFadden, yes.
Diane Parsons, yes.
Steve Stone, yes.
Okay, this meeting's now closed. Thank you, everybody.